Hi, my name is Trista. I'm an 8th grader at South Milwaukee Middle School. I'm currently working on daylight hours in science class. My favorite subject in school is math, and when I graduate, I'm planning on being an artist. And I'm most looking forward to theater in high school.
Thank you, Trista, for helping us start the SMY podcast. I'm your host, Dan Bader, the Communication Coordinator for the School District of South Milwaukee. Middle school is where we bring this episode, specifically to a new program called Foundations for Success. A listener asked us to explore this class, and unlike our other topics in previous episodes, this is one that is new to me. In fact, it's completely new to everyone, and it speaks to a need our teachers and staff see in the district. Any job you have in your career, I don't care if it's hands-on like construction, or in an office setting, or anywhere in between, employees who are most successful can manage their stress productively and in a healthy way, and respond appropriately to setbacks and manage conflict with coworkers. Having a grasp of these skills may well determine if you keep a job, if you get promoted, and how easy it is to find another job if you need to. In our personal lives, these abilities help us make and keep friends and cope with what life throws at you. Our guest today is a teacher who developed the Foundations for Success class, Heidi Nairn. Well, Heidi, thank you for being on our podcast and for coming to tell us about Foundations for Success. Before we get started, I always ask a teacher what their big why is. Can you share with us why you teach?
Sure. Thanks for asking me to come in. It's pretty exciting to be able to kind of share who I am because I'm a pretty quiet person normally by choice and sometimes by necessity. I started to go into teaching more so because I loved literature and I loved studying the human condition and stories, which led to a lot of theater and studying the human condition and studying characters. And so I really wanted, because I thought you could always have really good discussions between individuals as to kind of what would they have done in certain situations, how would they have felt in certain situations. So kind of a twofold, loving the idea of literature and how it's actually put together, but then also using that for great background for discussions on humanity. And what does that mean for other individuals? And it's funny because I originally wanted to teach high school. And that's what I was shooting for, in the sense that I thought, this was how many years ago, 20 years ago when I was trying to decide like what age level. And I just thought, you can have really deep discussions, high school, they're ready for it. And then I substitute once for a 7th grade class. And I just had that feeling like I was going to get that position. And I ended up getting it. And it was a little scary at first because I was not used to the middle school, like energy and the mindset. And I absolutely love it now. And I'm so glad that it kind of took me on that path because the middle school students are so creative, so energetic, have a lot of why questions. And so you can create these deep conversations with them. So that's really why I got into education, is to, be available for people, teach them something, skills and strategies that they can use for the future, regardless if it's literature or not. But literature is a great base for studying humanity.
So tell me about Foundations for Success. How did it start? When did it start? And did I say it wrong?
No, you said it correctly.
Right. Okay.
I'm laughing because of the process of like how this started. And I was looking for something a little like a change of something different. I didn't know if I wanted to, wait for high school opening to try something, but something just fresh and something new. And I made plugs here and there for the mindfulness. And how to incorporate that into like my classroom. But then I was seeing more of a need for it with students and just individuals and how do you cope with things on a daily basis. And I have a communication background, education background, theater background, and through all of these experiences and an art education background, all of those things put together, like you can create a huge class out of that in order to create self-awareness. And so I just kind of kept dropping the mindfulness word, even though it's kind of one of those, what is mindfulness and what do you do with it? And I received a call this summer, beginning end of July, beginning of August, and my life changed within like 15 minutes. And I think Mr. Hendrickson was on a car ride home, and he asked if I was interested in a position and he used the word mindfulness, but the more we talked about it, and as we got together and planned, we decided that Foundations for Success was actually the better term for it, in the sense that it's skills and strategies and tools and opportunities and choices that students have within them, resources they have within themselves, resources they have outside of themselves that they can use to be successful on a daily basis or outside of school or in future, depending. So sixth grade focuses on conflict resolution, as well as everyday coping strategies for stress, understanding how stress affects the body. Seventh grade focuses a little bit more on the actual emotion aspect. Having taught seventh grade for 16, 17 years, they're in that jumbly part, where it's like, I'm feeling certain things. I don't know what I'm feeling. What is this? What do I do with it? And how do I use it for positive responses, positive reactions, responses, everything. Still teaching coping strategies. And then eighth grade is really taking that, but then pushing it forward more. Okay, you're going to be going into high school eventually. Like taking a look at purpose. Like, what are things you want to do? How can you be successful at those with the emotions, with the body, with the mind? And how do you stay in positive framework? So we offer them a lot of tools and strategies to be able just to give them seed planting in the sense, like, even if they never use the coping strategies right away in middle school, maybe further on down the road, if they really need it, they can look back and be like, hey, you remember that one class where we laid out on the floor and we did all these breathing exercises, and I think it's beneficial to show that there's these different tools and strategies that people can use to be successful, and just kind of adding it on.
Sure. So maybe it'd be helpful to stop and think a little bit about what a middle schooler is, right? Because I've heard a principal that I used to work with say they're half of them are still elementary school students inside, and they just want to play and do art and do everything that you associate with the cuddly warmth of middle school or of elementary school. And then the other one is these preteens that are kind of erupting into the next stage of their life. How would you define them?
So, it's such a gamut. I took the advice of one of my teachers from high school when I told her that I was teaching middle school, and she goes, just remember they're basically big kids, and it's so exploratory, at this age, and the changes and the shape changing that happens physically, mentally, all of these different things. And you have students who, need the encouragement to understand conflict resolution and choices and things like that, because they are learning how to respond to what they're thinking and feeling versus being like super reactionary. So, and then you have other students they'll experience things I will never have experienced in my life. And they're so adult in some areas, but they need the time and attention to be able to round out, like, how do I be successful academically? And so it's a whirlwind. I would say a middle school age group is a whirlwind, and a middle school student is a brilliant, creative individual who can still see opportunity and is willing to try many different things and want to move and want to talk, and just really curious individuals that want to know more about life. Like, why this? Why that? Okay, well, let's talk about it.
Yeah. Oh, that's a beautiful way to think of it. And so before I hit the record button, we were talking a little bit about how I imagine the skills that you're teaching are what a classroom teacher would want to be able to stop a class and talk about, look what just happened there, or how are we all feeling about this? But they can't, because that's not their goal for their class, right? But this program, that's what that's what it's for, right? Um, Tell me what a day, like one class, is about. Like let's take a sixth grade.
Okay.
What was today like? What's tomorrow? What was yesterday like?
We normally start out with maybe roughly 5 minutes of some form of breathing strategy, whether it's equal parts breathing, box breathing. I do something called finger press release, which is kind of focusing their energy, like whether it's excitement energy, nervous energy, into just like their hands, to give them a different focus and kind of teach them that you can check in with yourself. You can, regulate your emotions, to use that term, self-regulation. So we take about 5 minutes to talk about self-regulation and to practice it. Sometimes 10 minutes. It depends on if a conversation happens out of it or not. Right now, for a sixth grade class, we are taking a look at conflict resolution and really focusing on the difference between solution and resolution. And how do you know in situations when a situation has been resolved? And they're like, well, you feel better, or, you're a little bit more happier, or you're talking again, or whatever the conflict is that students have.
Sure. And when we say conflict, we could even, so when I did my episode on the STEM program in the middle school, one of the things that teacher heard from the high school was that collaboration was something that their high schoolers hadn't been taught yet. That they didn't know how to solve a problem in a group if someone else didn't had a different opinion about what they should do next. And it sounds like that is part of those skills that you're helping teach.
Absolutely. And it's practice. And to get them into the situation, to actually experience, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? How would you respond? How do you want to respond versus react even? Mm-hmm. And so it's really important that we create that situation and experience in the classroom, so then they can ask questions, or we can get feedback. Mm-hmm. Okay, what do you do? Like, this made me really angry. Okay, yep. Or it made me quick to anger. Great recognition. What do you do with that? And so we have those discussions.
Sure.
How you problem solve and invite everybody in.
And that, I'm sure that extends to the lunchroom or dismissal or whatever, because I don't want to minimize that our kids don't have conflict. We know they do. Mm-hmm. So I imagine that, they can be applied to the classroom and outside of the classroom.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. They're life skills. Mm-hmm. It's how do you create a healthy interaction and transaction with the people around you in good positive energy exchange to create benefit for all.
It just occurred to me, are your classes in the morning? Because it seems like a very morning thing to do.
I wish.
Oh, yeah, they're not.
No,
not at all.
I have 2 7th grade classes right away in the morning. And then I have 8th grade in the middle, 2 classes. And I actually teach 4 total because I have them every other day. Mm-hmm. And then 2 6th grade classes at the end of the day. And then they switch, 6th and 7th switch at quarter. Mm-hmm. So it's a big
So you see it
production.
from the beginning then. So some kids who come in relaxed or excited, ready to start the day, and then maybe burned out at the end of the day. So I imagine that feeds right into what you're trying to teach.
Absolutely. The 6th graders that I have at the end of the day, a lot of them will say, I really like having this at the end of the day because then I'm calm like when I leave school. And I'm like, yeah, it's really good to talk about that, but it's also good to have it in the morning. It's also good to have it in the middle, because that's how life works, right? You can't just like lay down in the middle of the floor and, when you're working, to like do breathing exercises or talk about things. Mm-hmm. So it's teaching them like, okay, even if it or when it happens throughout the day, like, is it possible? Yes, it is. Let's show you. In the classroom setting, like even as a language arts teacher, I would have to take time to, help students get to a healthy mindset, but I couldn't get to a total place of that, right? So in order to offer that to them, to teach them things, it's really important to have the space to do that.
Sure. Yeah, and I imagine it does save time elsewhere, you know, and to know that
that's the goal, but
Yeah, right. Well, and when you're collaborating with your colleagues, they I'm sure know some of the strategies that you're teaching, so that when they mention it, they know that the kids know what they're talking about. So like, how are we going to resolve this conflict? And those keywords might just help students engage those skills where they don't have to stop and teach the whole skill.
Yeah, and I think that's where we're going this year too. Considering that we've only been developing it for like half a year, now I can actually say, hey, this is what we're doing, even though we had a rough draft of what we wanted to do. It's really developed nicely, building on top of one another. So now I can, say to the sixth grade teachers, here's what we're teaching, or to the school, so that they know in sixth they did this, seventh they did this, eighth grade they're doing this. So that will be probably in a faculty meeting coming up.
Sure. Yeah. And so I've been talking a lot in our podcast about these professional learning community ideas where collaboration comes in. And I think that's probably an example of, the collaboration that is needed between grades, between subjects,
Absolutely. I have envisions of maybe having an anchor chart in every classroom of different coping strategies, because we talk about that in every single age group. And just to have that reminder in a classroom is so important. And, you have some teachers that create their peace corner, things like that this can be an addition to, hey, I know all of you have done this. Like, which one works for you? Because that's one of my main questions. Here you go. Here's your list of 7. Which one do you want to try? And I have students play with those. Here, you're upset, try coloring with mandala a little bit. They'll tell me, okay, that I've tried it for 15 minutes. It really isn't working. Can I do physical movement? Yes, thank you. Thank you for offering strategies. Thank you for using your mind to tell me what you need. And that's what we need, is to teach them to express what they need.
Sure. I guess we could see this if we're thinking of maybe more traditional classes in school, is a physical education class where you play all the sports and try to figure out which one you like the most for for lifelong physical health, right? Kind of the same idea as you'd mentioned it before about giving them just an experience of coping strategies to find what fits them. What's the feedback you've been getting? Do you get kids that check out and just don't participate, or how did they react to it? They've never had a class like this.
For the most part, I find it fairly positive. And it's really beautiful when you actually have a student that has a rough day, because you say, okay, here's the practice. Like, here's what we've been doing. Let's take a look at this, and then they normally come back even more positive to say, yep, this is what has worked for me. This is what doesn't work for me, and I always tell them, you're not going to hurt my feelings if you tell me that something doesn't work for you. Like, don't do something because I'm technically telling you to do it. Do it because it works for you. And so I think they like that freedom because it gives them that power of choice. And they learn about themselves. So I get much positive feedback. A lot of times there's some, obviously you have students in any year that need additional support. And once we get that rolling, we have a more positive turnaround as well.
Sure. How about parents? Have you heard that it's working?
Most of the time when I tell them about it, they're like, can I take it? Because it's something that doesn't stop, right? It's a constant process. And so the earlier you can introduce this to them, I would think the more successful they would be in the future in trying to figure out ways and strategies to resolve issues and problems. Because a lot of these things I didn't know about until like high school, college. And sometimes even after college. And I'm like, why didn't anybody tell me this before? And that's kind of what this class is too. Like, okay, let's talk about the hard stuff. Yeah,
I was going to say it's maybe self-evident, but how does this translate into the world of work, right? Because we talk a lot about career technical experience. We're giving people hands-on skills in the high school that walk across the stage and into a job. But I know that when I have a failure at work or something like that, I have to acknowledge that, and just kind of not put it aside. But I have my own coping strategies. How does that translate into the work world?
Sure. It's teaching them how you can find pause. So if there is a problem at work, and we talk about this, we practice this, like if you recognize emotions are getting high, what are options in that particular moment? What can you do? What are your choices? And we make a list of what those are. They make a coping plan strategy. They make preventative management. Okay, if I come into a situation like this, here are 3 options I can do to try to solve a problem or to resolve a problem. And it teaches them that there is a way. It can be a plan. And then if it doesn't work, that there's other options to try again. So failure really isn't an option because there's always try again, and that even in situations, sometimes the option is you need to change your situation, and so that translates in that way. What's the process? What does this look like for you? Okay. What do you know about yourself? Are you okay staying in a situation? Do you need to take a break? When are you ready to come back? All of those different things. So it's really doing that self-study, understanding yourself, and then taking a look at other people and what do they need, and how do you work on that together?
Sure. Kind of looking back, so the last episode was on reading and how we constantly adjust what we learn about reading based on data and science to adjust how we teach reading. It just occurred to me that nobody ever taught me a coping skill, and so I probably had to crash into some walls, and luckily that I didn't lose a job or a relationship based on these skills that I found on my own. But we all just learned from watching our parents or other, role models in the world. But we didn't get a range. We just saw what they did and thought that's how you solve a problem.
Right. And a lot of times even parents are, they respond, like even for myself, like, yep, like I recognize like this is something I need to work on. Right. And so they want to teach their children like how to respond appropriately. Like, I know I do this. I don't want you to do that, but I agree with that there is a part to learning through experience. There is a part to learning from the habits and behaviors from others around us. And also to recognize, I always use the word healthy, like what's healthy for a situation and beneficial and what's unhealthy for a situation, and which is the best option for yourself as well as for other people. So through the studies, and there's a lot more studies out there now, a lot more ideas of how to teach these things, how to teach about fear, how to teach about anxiety, what are the body's natural responses, what happens when you have those, how do you work through that, where can you find help? Those are all things I had to find out on my own in many situations, but I also had, my own parents to kind of help and guide too. So you can't like detach it. It's all one unit. And we kind of can take a look at that as a whole to be successful. Yeah. What did you learn that worked really well from, your family experience? What are you learning from class? What works for you? So you can fly after that on your own.
Sure. So I've talked to a parent of an elementary school student. I don't think they've made it to the middle school yet, but they, 'cause some of these coping strategies are being used in the elementary school too. Mm-hmm. I know every day Lakeview students take a minute and take three deep breaths, and then are reminded that they could do this anytime during the day if they need to just refocus and to get over the struggle they're facing. But anyway, that parent had said their child struggles with attention deficit problems, and that she sees them coming home where they might start getting in a fight with their sister, and then both of them stop and just take a breath. And she was just very thankful for it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it all comes down honestly to breath. I mean,
Yeah.
it really does. If you can get those 3 deep breaths in, if you can, and I was having this conversation with students this morning, and I'm like, look, you don't have to do this for 20 minutes a day. Find a time that works for you. 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 1 minute. Anything is beneficial so that you can always, it's almost like basketball, right? The more you do the drills, the more you practice layups, all of these different things, the more you're ready to make that shot. And it's the same function here. Return, practice, so that when you come into these situations, you're like, okay, I know what I need. I also have some students, when I used to do door duty after school, I'd have students come up and be like I had one student, it was awesome. He's like, oh, I was like really stressing out about a math test, and then I breathed, and it really worked. And then he like ran out the door, and I was like, perfect.
Yeah, that's a
thank
win.
you.
If you can get that from a middle schooler
Yeah.
to admit that something they learned helped.
Yeah.
That's
And
a
it's
big
so
deal.
different for them that when they come into class, having never had this before, they're like, what is this? And then the more comfortable they recognize like the benefits of it.
Sure. I've found, so now that, so the STEM program is brand new, and STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, stretches their brains in a way that they're not used to, and so the students I talked to in that class briefly were like, admitted that they felt a little lost, it was a little bit of a lot to struggle with. And it's, that too, that same experience where, well, not we, you guys are really just pulling at some of the bounds of learning a little further than maybe what they had perceived before that.
Oh, absolutely. And you can see the stretch and the growth. You can also see shutdown, where it's uncomfortable sometimes because they're not used to something new. And so you teach them in pieces, bits and pieces and layers, just like you do with the spiral, with language arts or any other type of subject. And you build upon each things, hence foundations for success.
Yeah. And so this can't be like you got an A in foundations for success. How do you be successful in your class?
So part of it is participation, obviously. You don't know if something's going to work unless you go through with it. But there's activities, there's daily exit slips, whether it's reflective responses or just answering questions of what they're seeing and what they're observing. If it's something that we're watching, something that we're studying. They do projects of bringing all of these things together. Like the 7th grade is doing a book on emotions on Book Creator, bringing in like they're picking a particular emotion that they're curious about, doing research on it, finding out like what's definitions of it, when might people experience this, what are coping strategies for it. So you can check off boxes, and say, okay, they're finding coping strategies. They're, all of those different things of self-care. So there's criteria. Sure. But within the scheme of, understanding yourself, it's just, what are you understanding? If you turn in a blank sheet of paper, well, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Let's get something down on here. Like, where's the struggle? And for the most part, I mean, most of the individuals complete the work.
Sure. So, big picture, when a student is done 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade, what do you hope they take away from it?
Gosh, my hope is that they understand that they're resilient individuals, that they have everything they need within them to figure out what they need, and that they don't have to solve everything on their own, and that they have circles of support, whether it's close to them, outside of them, and sometimes it might mean reaching out further, whether therapy, whether counseling, whether some form of community, like I'm a part of the Heart Revival Yoga Center. I meet every Monday night with a group, and it helps me stay functional, like in my daily life, and to know that those things are healthy, and to really, for myself even, make sure I keep practicing these things, because I want to live by example, and I want them to follow positive examples of what this can look like, and that you can be kind, you can still be effective. You don't always have to be violent about certain things or explosive, and that the most beneficial way is to treat yourself with compassion as well as other people. That's where success is.
Great. Well, thank you. I think that's a great place to stop. Well, Heidi Naring is the teacher for our Foundations for Success class at the middle school. It's a new program this year. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to today's podcast. I hope it gave you a deeper understanding of the work that's happening in our schools. If you have a question you think should be answered on an upcoming podcast, email us at info@sdsm.k12.wi.us. And make sure you RSVP for Picking Up STEAM, our celebration of science, technology, engineering, arts, and math in our schools. We're having that on February 10th from 5 to 7 p.m. at the high school. Traditionally, we celebrate all things literary during this celebration, and we'd hold our annual arts show. This year, we're expanding our focus from the arts to the intersection of all those disciplines. The main event is a wacky science show, and there'll be plenty of hands-on activities for children and adults, including food offerings from our nutrition services. It's a great annual tradition that includes the whole community. Save the date for Picking Up STEAM, February 10th from 5 to 7 in the high school. A big thank you to our guest Heidi Naring and to middle schooler Trista for our introduction. The SMY podcast is a production of the School District of South Milwaukee. You can find more episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you get your podcasts. This has been the SMY podcast. We'll see you next time.